And that, my friends, is how America was made great once again. Breaking at this hour, Jimmy Sengenberger is currently at the crossroads of politics and economics. Radio broadcaster master, now the celeb on the web. He's the smarty of the party. He's in cahoots with the grassroots. Jimmy at the Crossroads brings you thought-provoking commentary, hard-hitting interviews, original satire, and the best bumper music known to man. Jimmy at the Crossroads!
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. People want answers, they want to understand. They come to the crossroads and Jimmy gives them the plan. I said, gonna talk money, gonna talk politics. Great for all generations, oh what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends. May the 4th be with you, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, your host for the program, who is, as you will see, indeed, quite a nerdy Star Wars fan. But hey, you gotta love it. It is Star Wars Day. Welcome to the show. Happy Monday to you. It is Monday, the 4th of May, or May the 4th. So great to be with you today here on the show. Looking forward to checking in with Phil van Doorn, investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch, to talk with him a little bit about what in the world is going on with the stock market and important things to keep in mind. Then we're going to talk about civil liberties in America today with coronavirus and the pandemic and the crisis we're facing today as a nation. We will also talk with Roshini, who is a messaging guru, about how the Trump administration has been handling the situation as far as the messaging is concerned. They've dropped the press conferences with the president and the task force and have moved now back to the old model of a press secretary, the brand new press secretary, newly minted into the position. Kayleigh McEnany has taken over that position. And now she's been doing press conferences already. He's done 2, Friday and Saturday. We'll talk about that and more, including the allegations against Joe Biden, and how he's been responding to them with Roshini Rajkumar later on in the show. But first, I'm wearing my Yoda green today because it is Star Wars Day, and being the huge lifelong Star Wars fan that I am, I thought it would be prudent to bring forth some lessons from Star Wars that we can and should pay attention to amidst the coronavirus crisis. Now, George Lucas had some political things in mind, some things he didn't have in mind when creating Star Wars. But the reality is that there are some very stark lessons, some very important lessons that Star Wars teaches us about society, about government, about empowering government, empowering authoritarian dictators to subvert the will of the people, but with seemingly the consent of the people, because they allow him, they acquiesce power to him and allow him to take charge. That is what we see especially in the prequels of Star Wars for the rise of Chancellor Palpatine, who is a man who seems so caring about ethics, who seems to really care about democracy, about the idea that the Republic should be preserved. The Republic, of course, throughout the episodes 1 through 3 of Star Wars, is the body that controls the galaxy through a democratic type of situation. Now, how democratic it is, I don't know. The galaxy is vast. There are lots of people in the Senate. Naboo has a queen that's elected, but a queen nonetheless, and then sends a senator to the Galactic Senate. So you don't know how democratic the Republic really is, but it certainly is a democratic sort of institution. And it's a parliamentary system in the sense that the chancellor is elected by the Senate, by the legislative body, kind of like the UK, United Kingdom, or maybe like the European Union. Some have said that the Star Wars Galactic Senate and its republic structure is more like the European Union or sort of the United Nations, and then you elect a leader from that body. That may be the case. Regardless, that's the authority that is in the galaxy, is the Republic, the Senate, which elects a chancellor. In Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, we see Palpatine replace Valorum, the failed chancellor who lost out to the passions of the galactic senators who were concerned about corruption from Valorum and replaced Chancellor Valorum with Palpatine. Now, Palpatine took charge, and for like a decade, he was in charge as Chancellor of the Galactic Senate before a crisis happened, a separatist crisis, where a war was afoot. This would begin the Clone Wars, a galactic civil war, really the first galactic civil war that would take place. And in Episode 2, Palpatine was given extensive authority. Let's go ahead and play Cut 2 from Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, where Palpatine manages to secure emergency powers, and he sounds oh so sincere about his love for the Republic and for democracy.
It is with great reluctance that I have agreed to this calling. I love democracy. I love the Republic. The power you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated.
Emergency powers given to the leader of a democratic society. And notice he says, the powers you give me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated. Right now, we're faced with an emergency. Across the nation, we see death and destruction as a result of two things. One, the coronavirus itself, which has taken lives, tragically. Nearly 70,000 Americans have died as a result of COVID-19 and this pandemic. And then we have the destruction of the economy. That has happened particularly because governors have shut down the economy and persisted as such. You can see that talking about Palpatine and his dictatorial powers just gets me choked up. So here you have a society right now in the United States of America where we have given emergency powers. Not because legislatures have necessarily said, oh, this is a crisis, therefore we're going to give you this emergency authority, but they've already given it. And then the governors unilaterally take control. Some have said, well, I'm only going to take this for a short period of time, and they're starting to reopen already. Others have said, this could go on for months and months. Certainly, we see the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. We see the governor of New Jersey, the governor of Virginia. Now, they are faced with genuine crises, but they are giving indications that they may keep things shut down for as long as they feel it's necessary, for months on end, potentially. Will they lay down their powers when this crisis has abated? Perhaps. Probably the authority to shut things down will stop, but there will be an increase in authority. There will be an expansion of power in these states that the people of those states will probably tolerate for some time. We saw in Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Chancellor Palpatine finally take his place as the leader of the galaxy, not so much just as a chancellor, but actually as the new emperor of a galactic empire. Now, this is years after assuming authority at the beginning of this war, and now he's got a new enemy, the Jedi. And you can hear the Senate acquiesce, give in to the desire for Palpatine to take power. Let's play cut 3.
In order to ensure the security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society.
For a safe and secure society, the Republic reorganized into the first galactic empire. Now, no governor, no president will be explicit. No governor or president will say, hey, I'm amassing this power and we're turning it into an empire. The Empire State of New York will truly at last become the first American empire state. Now, that's not literally going to happen. But what we see in the prequels of Star Wars is the usurpation of liberty by the government, and in particular by one single individual. Now, James Madison had serious warnings about the accumulation of power in the hands of one individual. Let's put up this quote. We put it up last week. James Madison, in Federalist number 47, he had this to say about the accumulation of power by one person or one small group of people. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Now, what are we seeing from these governors? What are we seeing from these governors? And also in Star Wars from Palpatine, but the accumulation of power in the hands of one individual, legislative, executive, and judicial. Palpatine becomes one sole authoritarian who has maximum control over the galaxy. And in our states, state after state after state, you have governors who have decided that they can unilaterally shut things down and don't have to worry about individual rights. You know, the Governor Murphy of New Jersey was on Tucker Carlson's show a couple weeks ago on the Fox News channel, and he basically said he's not paying attention to the Bill of Rights during this crisis. It's not a concern of his. Yet individual rights are not to be subordinated to the government strictly because there is a crisis. That does not mean that the government can't be implementing some policies, but we must keep in mind that whether it is this crisis or a future crisis and past crises that we have faced as a country, that every time we give government more authority, they may give a lot of it back, but they still retain a good bit. They still retain a lot of power because the people let them. Now, in the Star Wars saga, it took years for the Empire to amass its authority. And let's add in now cut 6. Because in Episode 4, A New Hope, the original Star Wars movie, you have a very seminal meeting among leaders of the Empire in Governor Tarkin's region, Grand Moff Tarkin's region, on the Death Star. And it's interesting because, I think 20-something years have passed between Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, when Palpatine takes charge, and Episode 4, A New Hope, when this takes place. And throughout that time, the Galactic Senate has been there as sort of a placeholder institution to give people a sense of normalcy. This is still a republic. This is still a democracy. We've just given it a different name, the Galactic Empire. And we know that, the Emperor has a lot of power, but there's still a Senate. Until now.
The rebellion will continue to gain support in the Imperial Senate.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
That's impossible. How will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy?
The regional governors now have direct control over their territories. Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station.
Regional governors now have direct control, and he's banking on fear of the Death Star. Their battle station, sure created by the galactic government, the Galactic Empire, to keep systems in line, but they have no need for the Senate anymore, so they dispel with the Senate. There's no need for it anymore. And the governors will have this authority. Now, we don't have a Death Star, and coronavirus was in no way created by the government of the United States, nor something that the government had any intention of bringing in. This happened naturally, and politicians have responded accordingly. And understandably, we have lost tens of thousands of American lives. But at the same time, these governors across the country have amassed great power. Again, usurping individual rights. Although, as the judge in Michigan who last week ruled in favor of upholding Governor Whitmer's order there, said liberty interests are subject to society's interests. That's sort of the philosophy here for why they're amassing this kind of power and authority. But they've been using the coronavirus as at least an opportunity to expand power. Now, I'm not saying that it's not necessarily intentional for them to do it because they want to help people and genuinely believe. Absolutely, that could well be the case, that they are, and I think for most governors in this country, that's the intention. The intention is to help people, and they believe that empowering government is the way to do it. Philosophically, they believe it. And so you can't fault them for their intentions, but as has been said many times before, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. You heard in that first clip from episode 2, Palpatine, seemingly sincere, wanting to protect the democratic society that they've got, ensure the republic. Now, we know he was not particularly sincere as a Sith Lord all around the galaxy. He just wanted to, everywhere he would go, he had dreams of taking control and having maximum power. But what if he was sincere? What if he did think that democracy and the republic had failed, and he believed that actions were taking too much time to get done? We had crises that the galaxy was facing. You must act now, quickly. We don't have time. So what do? You give power to the one person who can just unilaterally make decisions. That's what we're seeing. Good intentions or not, we are seeing the amassing of power in the hands of people who believe that government is all-knowing and all-powerful and should be providing for the people. And talking about accumulation of power, there's one more clip I want to play of Palpatine. This is cut 1, where the Chancellor assumes total authority even before he's declared his first galactic empire. Take a look at what he declares himself to be.
In the name of the Galactic Senate of the Republic, you're under arrest, Chancellor.
Are you threatening me, Master Jedi?
The Senate will decide your fate.
I am the Senate.
I am the Senate, Palpatine says, which channels Louis XIV, who said, I am the state, but shows the arrogance of this single politician who has accumulated mass amounts of authority in his hands and his hands alone. We heard the clip, well, I read the quote of James Madison a moment ago. Let's go to another leader of the United States historically. This is Thomas Jefferson about experience and those with power who have been trusted with the power. He once said, experience hath shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted it into tyranny. Even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have, in time and by slow operations, perverted it into tyranny. This is what happens when a free society becomes subordinated to the will of elected politicians or unelected bureaucrats, where we say, hey, you can take our rights because we have a crisis. You'll give them back to us. Those who are concerned about civil liberties in the Patriot Act, have they returned rights because maybe terrorism's threats are not quite as pronounced in the same way as they were 15 years ago? Patriot Act still in effect. We've seen FISA abuse. Look at the Michael Flynn story that we're learning more about. The way in which the FBI acted illegally and specifically to get Flynn to lie under oath, now proven. Perverted into tyranny over time. We have given, over the decades, more and more authority. Palpatine took several years. First, he took a decade to get emergency powers, and then several years more to amass greater and greater authority to the point where he was finally able to unilaterally declare the First Galactic Empire. Again, we're not going to see that extent of authority lost in America where suddenly we will lose all our freedoms for the future out into perpetuity. Democrats certainly are trying to paint that picture of Donald Trump, who they say might just not leave office, or at the very least will cancel or postpone the 2020 elections in November. Even Biden reportedly floating that sort of idea. Now, that's absurd. There's no evidence to even suggest something as ludicrous as that. But there is evidence to suggest that Democrats right now are doing what they can in state after state to garner greater authority in their hands to address this crisis and even to empower the president in some instances. They were calling on the president to invoke the Defense Production Act, which he has, but not as expansively as they would like. I mean, I look at the Trump administration. I see his unilateral trade authority to start a trade war with China as dangerous. For any president to have that kind of unilateral authority. That happened over time. That was approved decades ago. And he decided to take that and put it into a trade war. We saw something similar with the southern border. I believe in building a wall at the southern border, but not through eminent domain and a president of the United States unilaterally saying, let's build this. Let's go about it in these ways. So it isn't just one side or another, but what we're seeing more significantly right now is one side predominantly in state after state giving more governors more and more authority. I want one more quote up on the screen here before we go to a break. Thomas Jefferson saying this: every government degenerates when trusted to the rulers of the people alone. The people themselves are its only safe depositories. Every government, he says, degenerates when trusted to the rulers of the people alone. The Palpatines of the galaxy. The Palpatines of the planet. The Palpatines of the country. The Palpatines of the state or the city. The people themselves are its only safe depositories. You and me, Nathan Matoush. We're all in this together as people who are the ones responsible for ensuring liberty, for protecting our society, and for making sure that government doesn't amass too much authority. We need to be mindful of this. Learn the lessons of Star Wars on this May the 4th. Because we may well be, as one author put it a few years ago, going at hyperspeed to serfdom, or riding with a hyperdrive to serfdom. Channeling F.A. Hayek. It's our job, our duty, to stand up for our liberties and not allow a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital or in our own state capitals to make all the determinations for us to amass authority that they may or may not fully give back when this crisis has abated. Will they lay it down when the crisis has abated? That's the question. We need to ensure the answer is yes. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. May the 4th be with you. It is Star Wars Day. When we come back, some quick reaction from Nathan Matoush, working the Matoush Magic as producer extraordinaire, and then Phil van Doorn from MarketWatch will join us as we dive in to markets and investing. You're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads here in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. So these are the auditions. For guest host of my new show, Jimmy at the Crossroads, please step up and state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Phil. You know, every pancake has two sides, and we're going to get to the other side of that pancake when we come back from the break.
Mr. Shatner.
Bernie Sanders will probably be the Democratic nominee.
You're going to have to talk faster.
I was going at full speed.
Kelsey Grammer.
Very well. I'll send you all to heaven before condemning you to hell. My little snowy flake, poor little snowy flake, triggered in every way.
President Bill Clinton, whenever you're ready.
Hey, how y'all doing? So, how about we play a little game of the old switcheroo?
Thank you.
Hey, if I get the gig, do I get an intern?
Thank you.
Just asking.
Tom Hanks, go ahead, please.
I am Tom Hanks at your service.
Can you try an announcer voice, sir?
Oh, an announcer voice. Oh, come on. I got a lot of movies to do. Okay, I'll do an announcer voice. I am an announcer. I'm the announcer. Ha! How was that? The announcer guy. Ha!
I think we're going to have to do another audition call, guys.
America's politics are crazy. The culture is in flux. That's why we work hard to help you keep up.
More politics, more culture, and more access.
We focus on the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest names in politics and punditry.
Go to our website, WashingtonExaminer.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
We interrupt this program for a very important presidential message.
I have a very important issue that I'd like to discuss with you, the people of America, and the people of the United States as well. Traffic circles, traffic circles. These things are very communistic. Older people are terrified of traffic circles. I noticed this about 20 years ago when they came in. I said, this is no good. Our forefathers didn't fight in World War II to have traffic circles. They're very scary. It's, oh, let's all join hands and come into the circle like hippies. Wrong. You come to a four-way stop like a man and you take your territory, if you can handle it. If you can't, you get spit to the side and you're out. You lose. You're a loser. And that's what I wanted to make very clear at this time. Thank you very much for your attention. That's all. Going.
Ladies and gentlemen, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Let's bring back the set. The greatest Jedi Master of all time, Master Yoda, with Jimmy Sengenberger. Yo, the man, Jimmy. Yo, the man.
Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, working the Matouche magic. And yes, indeed, on this Star Wars Day, after my commentary, for a few moments we have Yoda on the set. As Yoda has said before, and we must all heed these words because I just taught a lesson in the last segment about what Star Wars can teach us about government. Let's get my lower third away. We got to see Yoda as I say the line. Mind what you have learned, save you it can, help you it will. Indeed, Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, we must mind what we have learned. How are you doing, brother? Happy Star Wars Day.
Jimmy, happy Star Wars Day. Thanks for having me on yet again. And we're with Master Yoda today. I like it.
Yeah, well, what did you make of my commentary there as I was kind of breaking down how Star Wars can teach us important lessons about the role of government, the expansion of government authority, and the crises which we face like this one?
I think it was really thoughtful. I mean, we can learn a lot from watching Star Wars. I think a lot of people forget how political Star Wars was. Especially like those newer ones. They're so into like the Jedi Knights and the clones and the Clone Wars. You forget really how much politics is influencing Star Wars. And I think you put it out there really nicely, Jimmy. I liked what you had to say. And, it just shows that, what happens when you give too much power to one person. He changes it into, a tyrannical type of thing, like what happened with Chancellor Palpatine. So, again, I like how you put it out there.
Well, Yoda told Luke, control, you must learn control. Unfortunately, I think that politicians have gotten the wrong lesson from that and said, okay, I must learn how to control the people in these sorts of ways. But just a final thought here, Nathan, before we run to our break, with regards to Star Wars and the lessons. I mean, there are a lot of lessons, and I don't know the extent to which George Lucas meant some of these lessons, but I think that we can nonetheless take those lessons from the saga and understand that giving power to one individual, particularly because you're facing a crisis, that's something you shouldn't do. That's a lesson we need to learn.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. You said it exactly right. And I think what came to my mind, too, is an Abraham Lincoln quote that I mustered up here.
Give it to us.
Yeah, this is Abraham Lincoln. He says, America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves.
Mind what you have learned. Save you it can, help you it will, Mr. Matouche.
Thank you, Master Yoda.
We're having too much fun here. We got to get to some serious topics coming up here with Phil van Doorn. Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jimmy, and may the 4th be with you.
And with your spirit. We're both Catholic, so it's a little Catholic joke going on here.
Hey,
we are on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will indeed be speaking with Phil van Doorn, investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch, diving into some market and investing topics. What's going on in this topsy-turvy market that we have been facing, and what are some of the key things that we should be keeping in mind? He's got a lot of stories. He's always writing it over at MarketWatch.com. Looking forward to that conversation. And then we'll talk about a variety of topics with Roshini Rajkumar a little later in the program here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Once again, may the 4th be with you. It is Star Wars Day, but we're shifting gears when we return. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. You're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads.
Fake cartoons. I'm gonna do the jumble. Who is it? What do you want?
It's me, Don Trump, Sir Elton John. I'm here to ask you a favor.
Oh my gosh, it's Captain Fantastic himself. So much glitter, so many sparkles, so bedazzled.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, I think. When referencing people in your speeches, could you please refrain from using my song titles?
Oh, you mean like when I called Kim Jong-un Rocket Man?
Yes, exactly like that.
Okay,
Yes,
from now on, he's Madman Across the Water. How would you like?
Well, you see, I have a problem with that because
How
it's the
about
same
if I
derogatory...
call Tulsi Gabbard the Island Girl?
I know, Tulsi, and I don't think she
Ben
would
Carson. Ben Carson is Honky Cat, that's all.
You can't call Ben Carson Honky Cat. That would be racist.
Why?
Ben Carson's black.
You know, I never noticed he was black at all. I never noticed that. It's funny that somebody like you, Elton John, would point that out to me.
Well, I don't...
All right, fine. From now on, he's Benny and the Jets.
Well, I suppose that's...
Benny and the Jets.
Yes, when Nancy Pelosi inevitably decides to have another round of impeachment, could you please refrain from saying the bitch is back?
It doesn't matter what she says. I'm still standing.
I suppose I'm just going to have to live with that. Fine. If you don't want to help, I'm out of here.
Go on, get out. Hit the yellow brick road so fast and hard. Get out.
Oh, and one more thing, Don Trump. The lyric goes, hold me closer, tiny dancer, not hold me close with tiny hands, sir. Thank you.
Go on, get him out of here. Get him out of here. Let's see. Rhymes with impeachment.
Hi, Tom. Gee, you look terrible.
I feel terrible. Achy, fevery, nauseous.
Ooh, that's too bad. You know, you ought to...
Chills, stuffiness, bloating.
Yeah, you know...
Scratchy, gassy, drippy.
I know. Say, Tom, you should try Wearaflu.
Wearaflu?
Wearaflu is the only medication that actually takes your flu symptoms and hides them at various places inside your body so that by the time your body finds them all, your flu is gone. In the meantime, you're back to work.
You were right, Ed. Wearaflu lets me ignore my flu symptoms and gets me back to work. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks for coming in and infecting the rest of the office.
Come out wherever you are with Wearaflu. Take as directed.
Hey, this is Frankie.
Hey, and I'm Angelo. We're the owners of FNa Pizzeria. If you're looking for the best pizza in town, remember us, FNa.
Hey, we got the best crust.
FNA.
We got the best cheese.
FNA.
We got the best sauce.
FNA, man.
Put it all together, what do you got?
FNA.
Yeah, you got that right. FNA.
FNa Pizza on the corner of Hill Yeah Avenue and Dam Straight Street.
Luke, you will go to the crossroads. There you will learn from Jimmy, the political master who instructed me.
We're having too much fun here at the Crossroads. I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Great to be with you. Nathan Matoush, producer extraordinaire, working the Matoush magic day in and day out here on this show. Coming in partnership with the Washington Examiner. Once again, I am Jimmy Sengenberger. Thanks so much for joining us on this Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And, of course, if you haven't done so already, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Like us on Facebook as well, Jimmy Sengenberger Media Personality. I did a count. We have over 100 videos on the YouTube channel already. Over 100 videos. Go check it out. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat from all the content that we have got. Be sure to follow our friends and partners at the Washington Examiner as well on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So the stock market's down a little bit on this Monday as of this broadcast, but we have seen some interesting dynamics playing out in the markets. Let's talk a little bit about what we have been noticing with Phil van Doorn, investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch, who rejoins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Brother Phil, welcome back. Good to have you, sir.
Good morning, Jimmy. Media personality. I like that.
Yes. Well, hey, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Do you like Star Wars, Phil, or are you a loser?
I enjoyed the first 2 movies especially, and I have fond memories of seeing the second movie twice. I guess it was 1980.
Sure.
Jedi was a little bit of a letdown, but I thought that the prequel trilogy was silly. It just didn't work.
So as long as you like some of the Star Wars movies, I will accept the criticism of the prequels and also the sequels. But I grew up on the prequels, so I'm rather fond
I can
of
tell
them.
you something, though.
Yeah.
Here's what you did not experience. When we're waiting 3 years for a new Star Wars movie to come out between 1977 and 1980, when you walked into the theater for The Empire Strikes Back, you have the most incredible music playing on the most incredible sound systems. And for 2 hours, you're seeing images that you could not see on television.
Right.
Television was low resolution. There were a few sci-fi movies out there, but you had no chance of seeing anything like what you could see in the theater now. These days, life's a little bit different. You see beautiful images right on the television.
No, that's a good point, Phil.
You weren't there. You can't tell how exotic it was.
Well, in the first movie, seeing that in 1977, did you see that one in theaters? The original?
No, I watched that at my aunt's house.
So the first one, anybody who I have talked with who has seen the first one in theaters has said it was just a remarkable experience because nothing ever like that had been on screen before.
Yeah, and that's what I experienced with the second movie in the theater. I didn't see the first one in the theaters until they were remastered in the 1990s.
Yeah,
when they did a lot of simultaneous food issues with at McDonald's, you can get some pretty cool Star Wars toys. Wow. I suppose in 93 or 94. Maybe it was 94. I cannot remember what year it was.
So
I did get this.
It was
remarkable cube toy from McDonald's.
I think it was 96 or so because I saw at least a couple of them in theaters when the special editions did their runs in theaters when I was a kid. So in the 90s, I remember going to movie theaters to see that.
Yeah.
So
I just loved
it. Yeah.
It was a little disconcerting because some of the effects that he added to the first one did not look proper in the theater. They looked pasted on.
I don't recall that,
okay.
but I believe you. I can understand some of that. But, it is Star Wars Day, so we were talking a little bit about some of the lessons
because
we
it's
can
May
learn
4th.
from Star Wars. Yes, because it's May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. So, exactly, it's
That's
Star
awesome.
Wars Day. I mean, that's exactly it. So,
you
is
can
this a
look,
revelation
Thomas,
to you? Did you not realize that
you
today is
can,
Star Wars Day, Phil?
Since you said May the 4th be with you,
yes.
When you're in the mood for something that's a little bit funky, you can look up on YouTube Thomas Dolby, May the Cube be with you.
Okay. Don't tell me
that's
more.
That's something I know. You can't play it on the show now, I suppose, but you can listen to it later. It's a nice piece of music.
I will check it out.
But it is not blues.
Yeah, fair enough. Gosh darn it! Maybe I'll do a bluesified version of "May the Cube Be With You." I don't know what the song is. I got to listen to it first. Phil van Doorn, investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch. Let's jump into some serious topics at the moment. The market's been just a fascinating thing in the last couple of months with the ebb and flow. We've seen bad economic data, yet the market's been performing relatively well. Right now, we're seeing sort of a mixed bag as of this broadcast, slightly up on the NASDAQ, slightly down on the S&P and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, just day-to-day stuff. What do you think is going on overall in the market right now, Phil?
I don't know what's going on, but I do know what people need to do.
I didn't say no. I said think. What do you think is going on?
I think the market is being supported by an incredible amount of cash that is available to investors. So the cash needs a home. The stock market is a lot smaller than the debt market, and the debt market is not very attractive. It depends where you're looking, of course. There are a lot of interesting opportunities in high yield debt with some pretty funds. But in the world of equities, we've seen a faster recovery than we've seen in previous crises because the Federal Reserve and the federal government have acted so quickly simultaneously. There's so many different programs and there's so much money out there supporting stocks. But what I think is worth pointing out is that the market, if you look back 12 months, yes, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 11%, but the S&P 500 is down 3%, excluding dividends. That means it's pretty much flat if you include the dividends. What this means is that you have to think about your mindset in the third week of March when the market was down. You may have said to yourself, I should have sold my stocks 2 weeks ago or a month ago, and then I would have avoided all this pain right now. If you were thinking that at the bottom, you should sell now, because you're looking forward to horrible economic reports coming out in July. So if you're worried day to day about the stock market, this is
Phil van Doorn, our guest from MarketWatch. You cut in and out for just a second there. Phil, can you say the last 15 seconds again?
My point is that if you cannot handle a down market, this is an opportunity for you to get out and rebuild your portfolio, diversified at least in part away from stocks. If you're a 401k investor with many decades to go, when the market crashes, you're paying lower prices as you pour money in every paycheck. But if that's not you, it's time to explore different possibilities because the market essentially is flat from a year ago.
So since you mentioned dividends a moment ago, let's talk for a moment about 9 stocks. You have a new story up today about 9 stocks that face dividend cut risks. What are those? What's happening?
I spoke to a gentleman named Rob Spivey, who is one of the 2 founders of a company called Valens Research. This is an independent financial research company. They sell data and reports and recommendations to investors. Unlike the Wall Street analysts, which work for brokerage firms who are also trying to sell stocks, these guys are free to be completely independent. And what they do is they make a bundle of changes to the reported numbers for 32,000 companies. They have a large staff working on this. They try to blow past all the noise and all the inaccuracies in the financial statements to tell you what's really going on. So they put up a list. It's one of their short ideas lists of stocks that they think are at high risk for dividend cuts. One thing that consider, you might look at a company with a high debt ratio and say, these guys are in trouble. But that doesn't tell you when by the Valens teams, and they look out over the next couple of years. If a company does not have sufficient cash to pay off bonds that are coming due, and the debt market is disrupted again, you may have to cut dividends in order to support your cash flow. So they listed 9 familiar companies, and you should check it out. I can read off the list if you like.
Yeah, again, Phil van Doorn is our guest here. He's investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch. Phil, please go through the whole list and then maybe pull out 1 or 2 companies that are particular standouts on the list as being especially interesting.
Okay, the list, there's in no particular order. Deere & Company, that makes John Deere equipment. General Mills, which makes dog food. General Dynamics Corporation, Conagra Brands, Newell, Kraft Heinz, Kellogg, more dog food, Campbell Soup Company, and Sealed Air Corporation.
I like dog food, man.
Well, cereal is dog food made by dog food companies, but that's a different subject for a different day. All of these companies have debt coming due over the next couple of years, which could lead to dividend cuts if they're forced to shore up cash. What if the market changes so that they would be paying too much to refinance? Then other things will be on the table. Company General Mills, for example, they bought a company called Blue Buffalo in 2008 for $8 billion. In 2018 for $8 billion, and they issued $6 billion in debt to help pay for it. Now it's faced with a constant flow of maturing bonds over the next few years. So if we have a lockup in the credit markets, which is possible over the next year, they may have to cut their dividends. You have specific risks for specific companies. Like Conagra Brands has a lot of food service and restaurant customers. So they also have debt maturities and the threat to cash flow, which may lead to a dividend cut. So that's pretty much the theme on all of these. Kraft Heinz has already cut their dividend, and they, according to the Valence team, their cash flow is not sufficient to cover their upcoming debt obligations. So they may have to tweak things, which includes cutting the dividend. So the article has some comments from them about each one, and the theme is, while they're in different industries, the theme is pretty much the same.
Now, I do have to say that in terms of cereal, because my mind is on cereal now, Phil. I mean, I like Kellogg and General Mills cereal, but I was going through old memorabilia boxes last night or yesterday doing some organizing at my parents' house of old boxes, and I found a box of Star Wars stuff that includes several empty boxes of Star Wars cereal from when Episode 3 in particular was coming out in, 2005. So, by the way, there was a period of time where Star Wars movies were still coming out every 3 years, even in my lifetime. So let's just keep that in perspective. Phil van Doorn, again, our guest from MarketWatch. Let's talk a little bit about this strategy. I have another story that was up over the weekend about buying the fastest growing businesses in America. There's a particular investor who's been using this strategy for 2020, has been successful so far. People are always looking for what are ways in which to be successful, including during this climate. Who'd you write about, and what was this strategy that was so successful so far?
Gentleman named Gerald Sparrow. He's an investment advisor. His company is called Sparrow Capital Management. They're based in St. Louis. This is a one-man shop, although he has a few people working for him, but it's pretty much him by himself. And he does not only look at sales, because sales in dollars can be spiked in different industries because of one-time events. He looks at unit sales. So he tries to identify, he looks at all of the publicly traded companies, small to large cap in the United States, looks at the fastest sales growers, then digs into unit sales to make sure sales don't pay. And he holds about 100 stocks. If a company's growth rate slows down, he sells. If a company's growth rate remains within the top 100, he keeps it. It's just that simple, and it's worked out beautifully for him. He started with this strategy, a switch-in strategy, at the end of 2016, and there's a chart in the story that is incredible. So he's performed very, very well, outperformed the indexes, and it was not only during the down market this year, it was through the late stages of the bull market. So I'm impressed. It's a different approach. Normally, a manager who outperforms an index will be concentrated, holding 20 or 30 stocks, so that his good bets have outsized influence to help him beat the market. But this gentleman has a completely different approach.
This particular piece is a strategy of buying the fastest growing businesses in America has paid off for this investor in 2020. Phil, throw another story at me, something else that over the last several days has been of particular interest to you.
Oh, Jimmy, you're putting me on the spot
That's
here.
exactly right. I wanted to ask you a broad question, give you a little room to choose a story that you like and want to talk about.
Well, I see a story. It's not necessarily that I like it, but I've been interested to see the story being played from different angles, which is the notion that the coronavirus may have been accidentally spilled out of a research laboratory in Wuhan, China.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, the Post was covering it, the New York Post, that is, was covering it over the weekend with quotes from Secretary of State Pompeo about the evidence. Then you had some quotes from President Trump. Story was either buried or not covered by the New York Times until, I believe, yesterday, when they started saying that multiple voices around the world were clamoring for investigations and maybe action against China's communist government. And I found it fascinating. When you get when you have media voices on the left and the right pointing in the same direction, you have something with legs.
Phil van Doorn, I think that it is true, and we've on this program, I've said, I personally, that I'm convinced enough that that is the case, that it was. I mean, it hasn't been absolutely verified with certainty, but I think that there is enough support to suggest that accidentally, perhaps, but still came from a lab at the Wuhan Virology Institute in Wuhan, China. I mean, I think that's the case. And just since you mentioned this, pull up cut 7, Nathan Matoush, because I just want to play real quick so folks can hear. Yesterday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who you mentioned, was on the Sunday shows on ABC News this week, and he had this to say about China and why he believes China hid COVID-19 from the world.
I want to turn to China with intelligence officials, as we mentioned, saying that the Chinese government intentionally concealed the severity of COVID-19 from the international community in early January while it stockpiled medical supplies. In terms of international concealing, I assume you think they did that intentionally to keep as many masks for themselves as possible. Will there be some sort of retaliation?
So, Martha, you've got the facts just about right. We can confirm that the Chinese Communist Party did all that it could to make sure that the world didn't learn in a timely fashion about what was taking place. There's lots of evidence of that. Some of it you can see in public, right? We've seen announcements. We've seen the fact that they kicked journalists out. We saw the fact that those who were trying to report on this, medical professionals inside of China, were silenced. They shut down reporting. All the kind of things that authoritarian regimes do. It's the way communist parties operate. This is classic communist disinformation effort. That created enormous risk, and now you can see hundreds of thousands of people around the world, tens of thousands in the United States have been armed. President Trump is very clear. We're going to hold those responsible accountable, and we'll do so on a timeline that is our own.
Makes sense that countries around the world would be deeply concerned about China, Phil.
And some people, sitting behind their desks or on their couches may oversimplify this. You do not instantly redirect all of your supply chains from China.
Yes.
Because it took decades for the current situation to be created. Apple, for example, indirectly through Foxconn, employs millions of people in China assembling iPhones. They cannot instantly move that production. But companies can start making slow changes. Why not? Why not open some factories here in the United States? I think at this point, people will be ready to pay some higher prices for products that are assembled here. There are also countries that are outside, closer than China. There are all sorts of different things that can be considered. You could also reconsider the required technology transfers that have been made to China over the last couple of decades by U.S. and Western manufacturers. Put everything on the table and try to come up with better supply chains. And Congress can do certain things. For example, they can mandate that American companies manufacture certain critically important personal protection items here.
I have mixed feelings about the idea of, actually not very mixed feelings. I'm not a big fan of mandating production of anything in a particular country, but your point's still well taken. I think the one that I particularly
You don't
find...
have to do that, but you could mandate that it's produced outside of China. There's tweaking that can be done.
Sure.
Why are we beholden to a country that considers itself our enemy for these critical items?
Fair enough.
We've also seen the behavior of China's communist government with their aggressive behavior in the South China Sea, waters that are considered international waters by every other country.
Fair enough. No, I understand.
At this time,
I think that I could be more open to, but we'd have to particular materials and what have you. But what I think needs to be done more than anything to incentivize production, particularly here in the United States, is significant reductions in regulatory costs and regulatory burdens. We're learning in this crisis that government is getting in the way in so many places, and notwithstanding what I was saying before before about the concentration of government authority, we're also seeing a lot of governors and the president cutting through the red tape on a temporary basis. They should make it permanent, especially when it comes to manufacturing goods. Then you provide a real monetary and economic incentive without any sort of mandate being necessary. But Phil van Doorn, I have one more question for you, just because every time I have you on, I like reminding people about this. Tell us your feelings on how people should interpret headlines when making investing decisions.
You could have just stopped with how people interpret headlines.
Okay.
And I could go off about
Fair.
how
That works too.
So much of printed news is nothing but, because after the headline and maybe one sentence of new information, it's all a rehash of the previous day's article. So sometimes people are reading newspapers or reading articles online and actually allowing their brains to wither as they get no new information except for the topic sentence. So watch out for that. Otherwise, as far as investing for the headline goes, I don't know what to tell you about it. Maybe that's good for day traders. It's not good for a real long-term investor.
Definitely. No, for sure. And I think it's always an important question to just stress, hence why I like asking you. And you always give a slightly different answer, but with the same fundamental point.
That's because I can't remember what I said last time.
Well, exactly.
So
of course,
a career in politics wouldn't work.
But at the same time, you get to the essence of the right point, which is don't just follow along with the headlines and then make your decision. You got to look a little deeper than that. I saw a story last week from the Wall Street Journal talking about how social distancing could be this generation's GDP. And I read the story and I was like, the story was interesting.
That doesn't make sense.
That headline doesn't make sense, and it was ridiculous. I was scratching my head wondering what exactly is going on here. I just don't get it.
It's search engine optimization.
Yeah,
you just
sure.
got social distancing and GDP in the same headline. You could have gone more arbitrary. They're trying to at certain media outlets, they're reducing COVID-19 and coronavirus appearances in headlines because some advertisers don't want their stuff anywhere near those words on the page.
Sure. All right. Well, Phil van Doorn, always an interesting and fun conversation to have with you.
Thank you, Jamie.
I hope you have a good week. Good to have you back here on the show. Investing columnist and analyst at MarketWatch, Phil van Doorn.
Thanks, Jimmy. And remember, please don't offend anybody with your humorous videos. Please keep everything clean and politically correct.
Yes. Well, I didn't want to offend you. I hope I didn't offend you, my friend, but may the 4th be with you.
You got it, brother. Enjoy. All the best.
All right, you too. Again, Phil van Doorn joining us for MarketWatch. Always great to have that guy on. Gotta love a good conversation with Phil. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into some different political issues with none other than another good friend of the show, Roshini Rajkumar. As we continue, you are watching Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. And once again, if you have not subscribed on YouTube, please be sure to do so. YouTube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Keep it right here. Welcome back to the Jimmy Sengenberger Show, your home for engaging, intelligent talk, same style, right here on News Talk 710 KNUS.
Please welcome Special Prosecutor Ken Starr.
Well, Judge, we've been spending a lot of time. You were on the radio for a full hour this morning with me.
And you were great, Jimmy. Everybody should tune in, regardless of where you live. He is terrific, and I also call him the harmonica man. He is really great with the harmonica. You required me, the law required me to provide you this, but you can do anything you want to, including ignoring it.
I was 8 during the impeachment proceedings, Judge.
What a show-off.
I don't remember. Every time I talk with you, though, and I tell you this, you're a historical figure for me because I don't remember a day of the Clinton investigation and the impeachment proceedings and anything.
They let me out of the museum, so thank
Good. That's why. Rumors of war with Iran and an outbreak of World War III are greatly exaggerated. The Arab world, Israel, all those relations are being rebuilt because of what President Donald Trump has been doing. Unfortunately, the federal government in the 1970s virtually ended bankruptcy protection for student loan borrowers. So what happens if the walking debt bites into your bank account so deeply that you become infected? There's no escape.
It's a lump of national debt following questionable economic growth. Here you go, millennials. Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho. It's coal.
Jimmy, your thoughts on this very quickly? Does this sap the energy away from the Democrat?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the whole nature of the impeachment proceeding at this point in time, the backdrop is significant. Just within the last month or so, you've had President Trump give the order to take out notorious terrorist Qasem Soleimani. He got through that democratically controlled House of Representatives, the USMCA trade agreement, and the economy is really robust. So I don't think this impeachment thing plays well for the Democrats. If you want to reach millennials, you have to understand what the generation is about. That we're not all socialists. In fact, there are natural reasons to believe that millennials are more conservative than you think. Listeners have been asking for more engaging, intelligent talk, Sang style. And guess what, folks? We're going to bring it to you. We are just getting started. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Thank you.
We interrupt this program for a very important presidential message.
I have a very important issue that I'd like to discuss with you, the people of America, and the people of the United States as well. Traffic circles, traffic circles. These things are very communistic. Older people are terrified of traffic circles. I noticed this about 20 years ago when they came in. I said, this is no good. Our forefathers didn't fight in World War II to have traffic circles. They're very scary. It's, oh, let's all join hands and come into the circle like hippies. Wrong. You come to a four-way stop like a man and you take your territory, if you can handle it. If you can't, you get spit to the side and you're out. You lose. You're a loser. And that's what I wanted to make very clear at this time. Thank you very much for your attention. That's all. Going.
Echo 3 to Echo 7. Honnold, buddy. Can you read me? Jimmy Sengenberger, folks.
I can read you, Nathan Matoush, but I'm not Han. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. Good to be with you. Welcome back. May the 4th be with you. It is Star Wars Day, and you're watching Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. And friends, it is always such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you. It is Monday, May the 4th. Thanks for joining us, being a part of the program. By the way, you can tweet at me 24/7, 365. Including now during the show, at Sang Center, that's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And of course, we welcome your participation that way, and email me via my website, jimmysengenberger.com. Remember, there's no A, there's no I, there's no U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. So great to be with you on this, the first show of the week. We've got a lot of good things we're cooking up, and it is our final segment today. Boy, how time flies. But last but not least, I am so pleased to welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, Roshini Rajkumar, who is a strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives. She hosts Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and Real Leaders with Roshini podcast, which can be found on your favorite podcast app. She's also a licensed attorney former TV reporter, and someone that media like yours truly across the country asked to comment on leadership, crisis management, political strategy, and PR blunders. Her book, Communicate That, is in its 3rd edition, and she joins us now. Roshini Rajkumar, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
May the 4th be with you. I also am a big Star Wars fan like you. It's definitely a special day in galaxies far and wide.
So I have to say, because Nathan and I did this before, you're a Catholic as I'm a Catholic, so say May the 4th be with you again. Say it again.
May the 4th be with you.
And with your spirit. So that's sort of the Catholic response. See, I'm totally nerding out today.
Exactly.
Like, this is a wacky edition of the program, but hey, we're having fun on this Monday, May the 4th.
Well, most of us couldn't go to Mass on Sunday, so, this is the next best thing.
I wouldn't go there, but I guess so. I think the next best thing is probably watching Mass on YouTube. But how are you doing amidst everything, all the craziness going on?
I'm doing pretty well. It's one of those times where I just got off a call with someone, and she was asking me the same thing. I said, it's one of those times that I have to take my own strategic communication advice, apply it to my world, to my business. And if I didn't, I'd go crazy, I'd go under. So, it's a real good time to put the skills that I teach others of pivoting into play, because all of us are pivoting all around the country to keep our worlds going, to keep our businesses going, and our families going.
And what is it in particular from the advice that you give to clients that's most keeping you composed and in control and focused with your eye on the ball?
I try to look at this as an opportunity versus a crisis or a challenge. We are in a crisis. That is absolutely the case. But if you look at it as an opportunity, then you can rely on all of your natural gifts and talents, whether that is for good communication, or maybe it's creativity, or maybe you're able to get a lot done on a dime. All of those things are gifts and talents you bring to the table now, and they're needed even more so in this time of needing to pivot if we want to move forward and be successful. So look at this as a time to stretch new brain cells, to give yourself some grace, but to definitely pivot in a beautiful way. And I hope, and I have a feeling, you will end up on the other side in a stronger position.
Roshini Rajkumar, one of the topics that we've been hitting on a lot recently, and I touched on it earlier when I did my monologue on what lessons we can learn from Star Wars about the concentration of power in the hands of limited or few government officials. Civil liberties are under attack in so many different ways across the country right now. I know you and I had gotten into a little bit of a discussion about this last time you were here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, and I'm wondering what you make of the discussion right now. You have a lot of pushback against governments in a variety of different states because they're closed down, but also some of the civil liberties that many Americans perceive to be under attack are very sacrosanct and truly important ones. We've seen the governor of New Jersey a few weeks ago on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News. He basically said, yeah, he's not paying attention to the Bill of Rights right now. There's a crisis afoot. Now, I'm paraphrasing and sort of just compiling what he said into one quick sentence, but that's the sentiment we seem to be getting. Where do you, especially as an attorney, someone who cares about the Constitution and civil liberties, where do you assess things as being at right now?
Yeah, I love the Constitution. And you know what? One of the things that makes the United States different from many countries, if not most, in the world is we do not forget about the Bill of Rights, especially in times of crisis. We don't forget about them. Obviously, there are times we can be a little more flex with enforcement, a little more lax about enforcement, but we can't simply let weeks and months go by with people living with rules that come down in a lot of cases from just one person, in many states, meaning governors' executive orders. So certainly we want to be safe. We want our fellow citizens to be safe, but there is never a time to short skirt the Bill of Rights. And I feel so strongly about that. It is what has guided this country. It's guided the courts. It's guided leaders of days gone by. It needs to guide leaders in current time.
And how well do you think our leaders are actually abiding by that? I mean, we know that in a lot of states across the country, probably a majority, you can't really go to church for example, and exercise that aspect of freedom of religion. There's also pushback against these gatherings. I think there have been some arrests for people who have been trying to put on rallies and gathering together with people in violation of social distancing rules. And the list goes on for other things that we have seen that seem to be violations of individual rights. The question is, are we finding a balance, or is the weight much more in government's authority to deal with a crisis, and not necessarily to hell with the Bill of Rights, but to hell with parts of the Bill of Rights, shall we say?
Well, I have a deep knowledge of what's happening in Minnesota, and I have been surveying what's happening around the country. I don't see any governors that are getting a 10 when it comes to the Bill of Rights. I do feel, though, that the citizens allow their governmental officials to push them one way or another. So I applaud citizens who want to protest. Hopefully they're doing it in a respectful manner. But even those social distancing rules, those are guidelines and rules. In most states, they are not laws that have been made by the legislature. And it doesn't mean I'm not wanting people to go out into the streets and try to purposely infect each other with different diseases. That's not what we're getting into. But we were built on peaceful protest. We were built on the ability to exercise our right to gather, to contradict, to challenge what government is doing. And then journalists, media, the reporters among us, which I am not anymore, are really supposed to question every branch of government and what it's doing. And what I'm finding and seeing, unfortunately, many times on social media, is that citizens or other government officials are challenging reporters from asking the tough questions. There's simply no place for that. We need to allow journalists to do their job, and we also need to let legislators and legislatures in every state hold their governors accountable. And we need to support them, and we need to ask and send in information and send in those texts or tweets or emails to our respective legislators so that they can then deliver those messages to the governor. And it's some support in holding the governors accountable.
I think that's very well said and so true. But one thing that's been disturbing has been the participation of many Americans in these kinds of things with snitching. Snitch lines, as they've been called in some states and cities, have been set up, and people have actually been calling them and basically ratting out their neighbors for not following certain guidelines and whatnot. And that gets concerning. You have some towns where they've been using drones to monitor people and whether or not they're following social distancing guidelines. States like Colorado, where I'm broadcasting from, have been using metadata and whatnot from cell phones to figure out how effective their policies have been. Now, you might think, oh, this seems good because we need to protect the interests of the people, that is to say, protect the safety from this virus and what have you. But as we've been talking about a lot on this show, you run significant dangers when you just start accepting government amassing this kind of authority, whether state or local or federal, in a crisis like this.
Jimmy, to the snitches, I say, get a hobby. I mean, really, is that the best thing you have to do right now is rat out your neighbors? It does not build community. It does not grow goodwill. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. If people are so concerned what other people are doing, I say to those people, you don't have enough going on in your life. Find a hobby, learn a new skill, watch some webinars, watch Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't be out there snitching on people. It's only going to come back and bite you in the wrong place.
That advice to watch Jimmy at the Crossroads, Roshini, I got to tell you, that was the best one that you listed in there. But good.
Yeah, you got to put that in one of your opens or one of your ads.
Oh, for sure. No, that's for sure. I do want to put up one quote because we were talking about this last week on Thursday. This judge in Michigan, Judge Christopher Murray of Michigan's Court of Claims, in upholding Governor Whitmer, her executive order that was really expansive. He said this, put it up on the screen, Nathan. Those liberty interests are and always have been subject to society's interests, society being our fellow residents. Now, I understand that you will have some elements of government where your rights are not maximal, especially if you trample upon somebody else's rights, but I read that and further comments that he made in his decision as being individual rights are subordinate to the idea of society's interests is somehow determined not just by government as in, say, the legislature, even deliberative bodies, but by a governor single-handedly making these sorts of decisions. And that, I think, is fundamentally dangerous, especially when it's upheld by the courts with that kind of attitude.
Well, we have this concept of minority rights in our country. It's built into our Constitution. It is why there are 2 senators for every state, regardless of the state's population. It's so that the majority doesn't go over and inflict or infect the majority, right? The minority. So at the end of the day, if the minority voice is just the governor of a state, that gets a little crazy. It gets a little more despotic. And I'm not calling our governors despots, but they were supposed to be challenged by the legislature. That is why we have 3 branches of government. So I want to respect what governors are doing, and the idea that society's overall interests should be upheld over maybe smaller numbers of people, but never because of reasons that are coming down in a unilateral fashion. It is why we have legislators, or in the case of cities, city councils, to check the role of the mayor. And, you pick your body of government and you can find that same analogy. So I just think there needs to be more transparency. We're also looking at time elements, Jimmy. When a governor places an executive order, it's usually, or emergency powers, exercises emergency powers, usually it's for a limited duration of time. In many states, we are now approaching 2 months. Nobody would tell you 2 months is a limited duration of time, especially when we're in this pandemic. And especially when you see various states opening up to various degrees. Even here in the state of Minnesota, about 130,000 employees have gone back to work since last week. And a lot of that is in non-customer facing industries, but you also have more and more businesses offering curbside service. Another concept in our Constitution is that laws should not be arbitrary and capricious. And I am seeing a lot of arbitrary rules, not even laws, but rules that governors and others and neighbors are expecting us to live by. And that's just not what's written into our Constitution.
No, absolutely not. And I do want to reference, and I went through this in the beginning, but your point is so apropos of what I was saying before, when in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Chancellor Palpatine gets some emergency powers, and he says that the powers you've given me, I will lay down when this crisis has abated. Lo and behold, several years later, not only does he continue to have those powers, but he amasses powers as an emperor. And we need to learn that sort of lesson from not just our history and the world history, but from Star Wars history as well. So I want to go to the messaging side of things, though. Roshini Rajkumar is a strategic communications and crisis coach. Get your thoughts on this. President Trump had been for weeks doing daily press conferences with the coronavirus task force, and sometimes would get into real tussles with the media back and forth, and it seems more about Trump versus the media than anything else. But I want to play a clip here. This is cut 12. It's from Saturday. And this is just an example of the new press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, who was formerly of the Trump 2020 campaign and of the Republican National Committee. She's now the press secretary and is doing regular press briefings, which the Trump administration had gotten rid of for well over a year. And it's just her now. Take a look.
We act in good faith. We want to provide these witnesses when they are requested. We want to make sure that it is, one, the right timing, because these experts do have day jobs that are very important to keeping the American people safe and healthy. In addition to that, we want to make sure that the subject matter of the hearing matches the individual they're requesting. Of course, we have different subject matter experts in all of our coronavirus task force briefings. And in this case, Chairman Lowy had reached out to the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, who I just spoke with before coming out here, and he had asked repeatedly for what the subject matter of this hearing would be, and it was a subcommittee hearing on HHS funding, which would have been a bit peculiar to have the NIH director who's under Secretary Azar and HHS. Exactly. So
that's a snippet of Kayleigh McEnany. She was asked a question about why the Trump administration doesn't want Dr. Fauci to testify at a hearing, but I just wanted to show an example of one person, very composed, knows what she's doing. I was impressed watching Friday's longer press conference, nearly an hour. She did a great job for her first time, and I think this is the approach they need to take. What do you make of sort of this change in communication tactics of the Trump administration, Roshini Rajkumar?
Yeah, this was a smart move. Should have come a lot earlier.
Yeah.
You can see all of the subtextual messages. She's wearing a cross on a necklace. I mean, so many different things, Jimmy, that are said in just that individual photo of her with the flags in the background. She is very tight on message. She says things that are smart. You know, and I'm not making a content judgment on that. It's just her delivery is smooth. And she looks good. I mean, much easier on the eyes than President Trump. And she's not going to put herself in a position where she's putting her foot in her mouth, which is often what President Trump would do. So this is a good move. You can do it daily. You can do it weekly. You can do it whenever you need to. But I have always strongly felt that President Trump shouldn't be out there. And now that we are a couple months, if not going on 3 months, into certain emergencies in different parts of the country, Dr. Fauci does not need to be out there every time. It made sense in the first week to 10 days of this crisis that each of the different department heads or Dr. Fauci was out there, but certainly now it's your press secretary. That's about all you need, unless it's some sort of breaking news, very new development that one of those other figures wants to be attached to.
Again, Roshini Rajkumar, our guest. Just for a few minutes left, let's talk about and shift gears to Joe Biden and the allegations presented against him by Tara Reid, who says that in 1993, when she was a Senate staffer, she was sexually assaulted by him. In Cut 9 on Friday, Joe Biden, of course, Democratic nominee in waiting for President of the United States, he was on Morning Joe with Mika Brzezinski and asked about this. And specifically, I want to first play the clip where he denies the allegations. Take a listen.
So the former Senate aide accuses you of sexual assault. And please, to our viewers, please excuse the graphic nature of this, but I want to make sure that there is no question as to what we're talking about. She says in 1993, Mr. Vice President, that you pinned her against the wall and reached under her clothing and penetrated her with your fingers. Would you please go on the record with the American people? Did you sexually assault Tara Reid?
No, it is not true. I'm saying unequivocally, it never happened. And it didn't. It never happened.
Do you remember her? Do you remember any types of complaints that she might have made?
I don't remember any type of complaint she may have made. It was 27 years ago. And I don't remember, nor does anyone else that I'm aware of. And the fact is that I don't remember. I don't remember any complaint ever having been made.
There's one other clip I'm going to want to get your reaction to from that interview, Roshini Rajkumar, but what did you make of his denial answer there in the interview from Friday on MSNBC?
I really didn't think it was very smooth, Jimmy, and, you know, I've kind of studied it a little since it happened. There was a little bit of Clinton 1998 Monica Lewinsky-esque to this response, and the unequivocal word that he uses in there. He just doesn't sound very human in talking about it and saying, I don't think anyone remembers. I mean, I think you have to have a little deeper answer than that. And maybe even some sort of a, you know, I don't know what I would have done to make her feel this way. If he truly did not do this, I think he also still needed to acknowledge her in some way that was a human level sort of response.
Yeah, I wonder if when they were talking about how they were going to have him address this among the campaign leadership, if basically they just wanted to keep a very simple message because, quite frankly, Joe Biden struggles to put coherent sentences together. And so they wanted to just short and sweet to the point, basically just say, well, not very sweet, but say, I deny it unequivocally and just be very clear there, but not add in some more flowery stuff.
Yeah, I can see advisors saying something like that. I would not have advised that. Anytime you use the word unequivocal, I think you start to look a little shady. I mean, It's just one of those words that has a negative subtextual message, and it's just because of how that word's been used over the last couple of decades.
Let's play cut 10 here. This is Mika pressing Joe Biden on his comments in the past about Christine Blasey Ford, who, of course, was the first accuser, the most prominent one, the one who testified before the United States Senate on Senate Judiciary Committee against Brett Kavanaugh last fall of 2018.
But, Mr. Vice President, as it pertained to Dr. Ford, everyone wanted, high-level Democrats said she should be believed, that they believed it happened. You said if someone like Dr. Ford were to come out, the essence of what she is saying has to be believed, has to be real.
No.
Why?
And no, what I said, it has to be.
Why is it real for Dr. Ford but not for Tara Reade?
Because the facts are look, I'm not suggesting she had no right to come forward. And I'm not saying any woman, they should come forward. They should be heard. And then it should be investigated. It should be investigated. And if there's anything that is consistent with what's being said, and she makes the case or the case is made, then it should be believed. But ultimately, the truth matters. The truth matters. It's period. I fought my entire life to change the whole notion of the law and the culture around sexual assault. And I fought to strengthen and protect the process for survivors. I believe that we've come a long way, and we have a long way to go in this system before we, in fact, are in a position that there's a fair and unbiased view. But at the end of the day, it has to be looked at. These claims are not true. There's no cooperation. I mean, they're not true.
Mr. Vice President,
I don't know what else I can say to you.
Notice there how Joe Biden, a couple times in a row, said the truth matters, which is one of the catchphrases that Democrats are using. These facts matter, truth matters, this matters, that matters. Anything that whenever they're trying to present a point, they say this matters, and I'm the one who owns that. I own the truth. What did you make of that response, which I didn't find very compelling, especially because also of how the Obama administration would handle Title IX guidance for sexual assault matters on college campuses and what have you? He has a very different tune now for himself from what he was saying Kavanaugh or when he was blasting Education Secretary Betsy DeVos for changing guidelines on Title IX for college campuses across the country. And then also, what did you make of Mika Brzezinski and how she handled that interview?
Yeah, so Mika really pulled a fast one on him. I mean, that's an interesting side-by-side, back-to-back question she went with. I would say this response from Joe Biden had a little more meat in it than the previous clip you played, Jimmy. But here's the thing. If someone is accused of something, like let's say you were in this exact situation, you're accused of something. If it truly did not happen, you would show maybe some anger in your face that anyone could be accusing you of this. There's so many different ways you'd react if something truly didn't happen. And this response that you just showed us shows that he was really trying to get the right words out there. I think if he had reordered his response, like started by talking about all the work he's done over decades to, as he says, bring sexual harassment and sexual assault claims forward, helping women to do those kinds of things. I think if he would have started with that and then wound into what he's being accused of, it would have been a much more natural and believable response. So you have to sort of watch different kinds of leaders and different politicians. Are they sounding too canned, especially when something of this nature, such a terrible nature he is being accused of? The human in you, like think of any time in your life you have been accused of something you didn't do, and that reaction is very natural, right? You're not trying to be canned.
Well, let me just say one thing, and then I'd love your thoughts on Mika Brzezinski. But Brett Kavanaugh, in his denials before the United States Senate, was very strong in his emotions, showing his anger, showing his anguish. And some folks in the media and Democrats were using that as an example to say, oh, he's guilty. So maybe Joe Biden had it in his mind, oh, I can't show that anger and emotion because if I do, then there might be that sort of perception or something. I don't know. But I
remember you and I spoke right after Kavanaugh's opening statement, and when we both gave him points for having human emotion and being absolutely ticked off that he was accused of these things. And I do remember it came down out into the outside world along party lines. Democrats thought he looked bad. Republicans thought he really took power over the situation and defended himself well. With pure messaging, I liked his approach because I think it showed the human side that he was appalled of what he was being accused of doing. It's a really fine line. And no matter what your messaging, if you have a history with the people, which Vice President Joe Biden does, that does come into it. And throughout the 2020 campaign, which got cut short because of COVID-19, we saw a lot of bumbling and fumbling by Joe Biden. You and I talked about that on your show many times. So this is not something of this very touchy nature that I expect he's going to all of a sudden have some rock star response without like a meteor hitting and a miracle happening. I wouldn't give him very high marks on this response.
Now, how about just real quickly, and I appreciate we're having you longer than anticipated, Mika Brzezinski, how do you think she handled that interview? The only thing that I would say that struck me as downside for how she was doing this was that she didn't actually talk about how Joe Biden, there's more corroboration for this than there was ever for Brett Kavanaugh. For example, she told her brother, she told a friend, her mother was told, her mother even called in to CNN's Larry King Live. We've played that video before. And also a few years later, she told a neighbor about what had happened. Now, you didn't have any of that kind of stuff for any of the accusers that were up against Brett Kavanaugh at the time. And yet Mika didn't make a point when talking about Kavanaugh and saying there's this difference. Doesn't mean that gives any indication that Joe Biden is any more or less guilty than Brett Kavanaugh, but it means that there was at least more support. There is more support for this from a corroboration. Yes, she at least has been consistent for decades with her story than there was for any of Kavanaugh's accusers.
So Tara Reade's call from the mother, especially because the mother has passed, would have a bit of a chain of custody evidentiary problem if this were a court of law.
Of course.
But yes, it does seem like this situation has a lot more corroboration than the Brett Kavanaugh situation did. I'm a little surprised. I haven't studied every part of Mika's interview with him. I'm a little surprised she didn't bring that up at that point, because that actually would have been a stronger position for her to come from in asking Joe Biden that question.
Well, it was a lengthy interview, nearly 20 minutes long, so there are a lot of other pieces we could certainly digest and divvy up here with you, Roshini Rajkumar, but I think we'll call it a conversation for now. I'm sure we will have you back soon. It's always so great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today on the program.
Thanks, Jimmy. We covered a lot of ground for sure. May the 4th be with you.
And with your spirit. Thank you, Roshini Rajkumar. Great to have you again. Check out her website, ownyourwow.com, and, of course, her book, Communicate That, Your Toolbox for a Powerful Presence. Always just fantastic insights from Roshini Rajkumar joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Before we go, though, I want to play Cut 8 as a follow-up. This is Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee, and he was asked yesterday on This Week, ABC, about this exact topic of Joe Biden, and here is what he had to say.
Well, listen, there's been so many investigations of the vice president. The most comprehensive investigation of the vice president was when he was vetted by Barack Obama in 2008. I'm very familiar with vice presidential vetting process. They look at everything about you. They looked at the entire history of Joe Biden, his entire career. And I'll tell you, if Barack Obama had any indication that there was an issue, Barack Obama would not have had him as his vice president. Barack Obama trusted Joe Biden. I trust Joe Biden. And those investigations have been done. Now, let's talk about Delaware for a moment. The University of Delaware, and any university that takes somebody's documents, they're taking their policy documents, they're taking their speeches, they're not taking their personnel records. And in fact,
but why not just search Tara Reade in those documents?
This is like the Hillary emails, because there was nothing there. And the reason is, if I'm going, I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1995. The ranking member was Joe Biden. If you want, I wasn't working for Joe Biden, I was working for Senator Kennedy. If you want to see my personnel records, you don't go to the Kennedy Institute. That's not where they go. And so when you ask the University of Delaware to take a look at something, you're asking them to look for something that doesn't exist. And the fact of the matter is that the President of the United States, the former President, Barack Obama, conducted an exhaustive search.
And that was 2008.
Martha Raddatz getting it right on the money. That was 2008. And let me say that that was a weaselly sort of answer. And to be clear, Business Insider has done some reporting saying that the National Archives, which is where Joe Biden says they should look, the National Archives are not where you will find these personnel records. That's what he's saying, or that's what they're saying. And we're supposed to listen to Joe Biden and Tom Perez and their denials. Oh, there's nothing there. You got to wonder, you got to ask yourself, okay, well, are you sure? And can we be confident that you are actually being forthright on this? That's a challenge. I think Martha Raddatz did a fantastic job in that segment of the interview, and I don't think Tom Perez's argument really stands up to muster. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger. That is it for us today here on this Star Wars Day. Brought back Yoda, whose wisdom is always tremendous. You must watch and learn. And mind what you have learned. Save you it can, help you it will. That is it for us today. Thanks for joining us. It's Monday. May the 4th be with you. Thanks to Nathan Matouche, producer extraordinaire. Our guest today, Phil Van Doorn of MarketWatch and Roshini Rajkumar. And to the Washington Examiner, of course, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. We'll be back tomorrow. Don't miss it. May God bless America. And my friends, remember, the Force will be with you always.